Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Kaltun Karani, and I'd be more than happy to share some information today with you about Somalia, history of Islam in Somalia, and some information about scholarship and Muslim scholars in Somalia. I'm Somali, obviously, and I wasn't born and raised in Somalia. I was born and raised in a different country. However, this is information that I've learned by reading and talking to some of my teachers. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me, and you forgive me for any mistakes that of course I'm going to make some mistakes, but I hope you would forgive me for that. As you know, Somalia is in the Horn of Africa. It's in East Africa, and it's got, it's shaped like a number 7. It has the longest coast in Africa, and it's basically in the north, close to Yemen and Oman. And it's from the west, it's like bordering with Ethiopia, and also bordering with Kenya. And so Somalia, however, subhanallah, Islam has reached Somalia very, very early on. There is a masjid in the north of Somalia that is basically, what I read is that it has the 2 qiblas. That this masjid is called Masjid al-Qiblatain. And it could, Wallahu ta'ala a'lam about the authenticity of this information, but basically this masjid has the qibla where the Prophet ﷺ was facing al-Quds, and then the second qibla when he was facing the Kaaba. So this masjid has both. There's another masjid, subhanallah, Masjid Abdul Aziz, that is 1,000 years old. So like when it comes to when did Islam enter Somalia, we know that the Muslims did the first hijrah and they left Mecca and they went to Habasha, right? Abyssinia. Now, a big part of Somalia, the historical Somalia, not the modern day Somalia, because there's been like the British divisions. There is a big part of Somalia called Ogaden that is located in Ethiopia. So has there been traveling of the Sahaba and early Muslims between? Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. The history says, and the rich history of Islam and the connectedness to faith tells me, yeah, Islam has entered Somalia long time ago. Something that I read actually said that it entered Somalia at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, Somalis have a nomadic lifestyle. We are proud camel herders. We have a rich history and culture of poetry and storytelling, which is, like how, so one of my teachers was telling me that this is how the deen actually spread, through storytelling. We're not we don't have a rich history of written history, right? But it is an oral society. It talks and it shares information through poetry. Let me see. Somalis are known for Quran memorization. We're very big on that. In fact, in Somalia, children start as young as when they're between 3 and 5 years old, and we have the custom of using the loh, which is the wooden tablet, to write down the Quran. So you would go to the teacher, and the teacher would teach you, the first thing they would teach you is hingad, how to read the Quran, and then you would have your Quran written for you in this loh. And then we also have this tradition called sub'is, which is how do you retain the Quran. People would sit in a circle and they would recite one ayah, second ayah, third ayah, fourth ayah, fifth ayah, and these are how people would actually practice and retain their Quran. I'm sure it's a cultural tradition that is in other cultures as well, but it's very famous in Somalia. It's a mandatory thing, we call it duksi, and all kids go regardless of what's happening and how busy they are and how busy their school schedule is. Going to the duksi is a must, right? And this is something that we have even in the West, right? Another thing is who are the scholars, or what is the how is Islam and how is it practiced? So Somalis are majority Sufi in Tazkiyah. Many Somalis would consider themselves Sufi. Historically, there was a lot more than there are today. I guess things, there's been like different teachings in the past, I would say since the war or a little bit before the war. But historically, Somalis were majority Sufi. And in terms of their tazkiyah, they followed the Sufi path, Sufi tariqas, and they're Shafi'i in their madhab. So Somalis would start with a book called Safinatul Salah. This is like a mandatory book that is a Shafi'i fiqh that kids would study in their schools. Also, when it comes to their i'tiqad or aqidah wise, it was known to be Ash'ari aqidah. Now, one of my teachers was telling me that ilm al-hadith specifically came later to Somalia. So it wasn't until, he said, in the late 70s, early 80s that ilm al-hadith started to come. And this is probably because many teachers were leaving and studying in Saudi Arabia, studying in Egypt, and bringing back that knowledge. So some famous scholars, now there is one famous alim that everybody knows and prides himself with, is like Imam Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan. And he was someone who his soldiers belonged to the Salihiyya tariqa, Sufi tariqa, and they were able to defeat the British to the point where the British had to use plane strikes against them, against their base, right? And he was someone who was like, in his poetry, you see this pride in Islam and fighting fighting the British so that Islam will remain strong in Somalia. Other scholars, there's another scholar called Ahmed Gurey who would fought with the Portuguese in Harar. Harar is in Ethiopia today, but it is in that region that I told you is part of Somalia originally, Ogadenia. I happen to be from that region. You know, my father was actually born and raised, and he actually passed away in that region, rahimahullah. Somali, I forgot to tell you guys, Somalis are very tribal society as well. And the tribal issues and wars and conflicts is the reason why we're displaced in the world today. I mention that because not everybody from the Ogaden region is from the tribe of Ogaden, right? There is a tribe called Ogaden, and there's a region called Ogaden. Not everyone from that region is from that tribe, okay? I mentioned it because I didn't want any assumptions. Not that they matter, but I just wanted to clarify. Now, Ahmed Gurey was another scholar who was actually Hanafi in his fiqh. And this is interesting. One of my teachers was telling me, even though Somalis are known to be Shafi'i, there are remnants of Hanafi fiqh in the way certain things are done. For example, he said that in the Shafi'i fiqh, a woman cannot, even if she was divorced, a woman cannot be married without a wali. However, there's Somali culture where a woman would be taken away from her family and married without a wali, and he says this and other things is probably the remnants of Hanafi fiqh in Somalia. There are some scholars that are known today. Sheikh Abdul Rashid Ali Sufi is world known for his qira'at. His father was a major scholar when it comes to tajweed and ilm al-Quran, ulum al-Quran in Somalia. His name was Ali Sufi. And Sheikh Ali, he studied in Egypt, and the son, Abdul Rashid Ali Sufi, is currently alive. He also studied in Egypt and he lives in Qatar. And mashallah, tabarakallah, he has a beautiful recitation. If you just Google Sheikh Abdul Rashid Ali Sufi, he will come up. His recitation is really powerful, mashallah, tabarakallah. There are other scholars, And the son, Abdul Rashid Ali Sufi, is currently alive. He also studied in Egypt and he lives in Qatar. And mashallah, tabarakallah, he has a beautiful recitation. If you just Google Sheikh Abdul Rashid Ali Sufi, he will come up. His recitation is really powerful, mashallah, tabarakallah. There are other scholars, so let me see here. This is something that I wanted to learn about and find out about. And what's interesting is that someone can remain in Somalia their whole life and reach a level of scholarship, meaning they don't have to leave the country to study Arabic, to study Nahu, to study fiqh, that study Quran, that there were an abundance of Muslim scholars in Somalia before they actually had to leave. But many of the later scholars or modern day scholars that people are familiar with, people listen to and know about, many of them studied in Somalia, then went to Egypt and Medina to study. Some of them are Sheikh Nuruddin Ali Ulaw, Sheikh Umar Farouk, who was famous for his tafseer. He spread the ilm tafseer in Somalia. Muhammad Ma'alin, he studied in Egypt. Sheikh Ahmed Hadi, Sheikh Abdul Noor. I think Sheikh Abdul Noor, I was told that he is basically the undisputable Somali scholar. And he was Shafi'i. He studied in Al-Azhar. He studied also in Medina. But he passed away, rahimahullah. Many of these scholars have passed away that I'm talking about. Sheikh Abdul Rashid Ali Sufi is actually alive right now. Muhammad, I don't know about the other ones, so let me not get into them. Many of these scholars write books. They have books. There's an imam called Imam al-Zayla'i. He has a book called Nasb al-Raya, and that book is very famous in Hanafi fiqh. This is what's interesting. That's a famous book when it comes to Hanafi fiqh. Now the scholars were known to be in the cities mostly, they were not Bedouins, they were known to be in the city dwellers, obviously because they were wherever the government was located. So to sum it up, I think there is also something to mention, that there is a serious extremism that is extremism, in terms of if you've ever heard of, there's a lot of suicide bombings in Somalia today. This is created by a group called the Shabab, and obviously Al-Shabab and other groups like them, we all know that they are political in nature, not Islamic, and they have nothing to do with our deen. But that's something that I thought I should mention. Somalia is almost not very safe because of these suicide bombings. Another thing that I wanted to mention, which is obviously I'm Somali, so I say it because I know my people to be people who are very generous, people who are big on giving sadaqah. If it was subhanallah, your family or your parents would tell you need to pay sadaqah, a big portion of your income goes to family members that you might not have ever met, but that's giving sadaqah is a major thing. Supporting one another when there is even though the tribalism has caused a lot of war and a lot of death and bloodshed, I think Somalis are people who love one another, and they love others. They are supportive to others. So in Somalia, there's always been people who are from different parts of the world, whether they were Arab or Indo-Pakistani. There were people from different ethnicities in Somalia. And then the last thing is Somalis are very passionate about their deen. Sorry, I hear my baby crying upstairs. But so Somalis are very passionate about their deen, about their aqidah is really strong, and their faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, when you speak, and I say this because I speak a lot to older women, and when they speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the way they interact with their faith, you could tell it's coming from a place of a firm conviction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that their faith is not shaken in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What I did want to learn about and I couldn't come across was women scholars. in Somalia. I couldn't find anything. Does not mean that they don't exist. But it is a I can't say that word, but it is a patriarchy system. So it is, it's possible that we don't really talk about women scholars, and they're not really given status much, right? So, but that's something for me to go back and learn more about. And if I do find information, I'll share it with you, inshallah. I hope this was beneficial. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.